So surprise, surprise, Apple released two brand new iPads via a press release, and it made the iPad lineup even more confusing than it already is. So let's talk about it. So Apple today introduced a brand new M3 iPad Air, which is going to be the successor to the M2 iPad Air. It still comes in the same 11-inch and 13-inch variant. It still comes in the same 4 different colors of space gray, blue, starlight, and purple. And like I said, it still comes in the 11 and 13-inch variant. The 11-inch is going to be starting at $599, which is the same price, and the 13-inch one will be $799 for the larger display. But for all intents and purposes, if you have an M2 iPad Air, there's no reason to upgrade at this point because you're not getting anything different aside from going from M2 to M3. I thought Apple might throw the C1 chip in here as another testing ground in the iPad space for data connectivity, but for now, again, the only difference right now is going to be M2 versus M3. They do have some numbers here that compare it to some previous models, so they compare it to the M1 iPad Air, saying that it's nearly 2 times faster compared to the M1, and then 3.5 times faster compared to the iPad Air with A14 Bionic. So yes, if you're coming from an older iPad Air, this is going to be a great little upgrade, but again, it's just an internal spec upgrade and nothing visually has changed from M2 iPad Air to M3 iPad Air. And again, in the press release, Apple does continue to compare it to the M1 version of the iPad Air because it gives you a little bit more of a robust number to look at because you are dealing with a powerful 8-core CPU, which is going to give you 35% better CPU performance compared to the M1 iPad Air, and then you have 9 GPU cores giving you a 40% boost in GPU graphic intensive performance. So you're going to be able to game a little bit better, but for most people, 95% of people, whatever the M1 and the M2 iPad Airs were able to do, the M3 won't really feel that much different. It's kind of when you're pushing it towards that 10th degree or that final 5%, where you might notice a few differences, but outside of that, you're not going to really notice anything much. But we did get a new piece of hardware, which is a little bit confusing because they did bring a brand new Magic Keyboard for this iPad Air specifically. Now, this iPad Magic Keyboard is different from the current iPad Pro Magic Keyboard and also different from the old Magic Keyboard, which worked with the old iPad Airs and the old iPad Pros. But basically, it's going to visually look the same as the current iPad Pro Magic Keyboard, but the trackpad is going to be a little bit smaller, so it's still going to be smaller than the current iPad Pro keyboard, but larger than the original iPad Pro Magic Keyboard. So again, a little confusing. You do get the function row keys you got with the new Magic Keyboard, but the material choices are a little bit different. So the hinge itself is still going to be made out of aluminum, but the actual keyboard portion where the keyboard actually sits, which is made out of aluminum currently on the iPad Pro Magic Keyboard, is going to be made out of that rubberized material that we've grown to know that Apple creates, which is going to be the same material we saw on the old Magic Keyboard of the iPad Pro, as well as like the Slim Folio keyboard. But again, it's going to be different from the current Magic Keyboard of the iPad Pro, making the Magic Keyboard situation extremely confusing in my opinion. Now, this new iPad Air Magic Keyboard will be compatible with the M3 version, the M2 version, as well as the 5th generation and 4th generation iPad Air, so at least there's some cross-compatibility, or at least you can use it with your older iPad Airs, as opposed to with the M4 iPad Pro Magic Keyboard. It only works with that iPad Pro. But that is going to be the M3 iPad Air in a nutshell. Very confusing overall in terms of the accessories that come with it, and we didn't even get into the Apple Pencil situation, which does remain the same. Basically, it'll work with an Apple Pencil USB-C as well as the Apple Pencil Pro. So now that we know all about that M3 iPad Air, let's talk about the other iPad that Apple released, because they did release a brand new entry-level iPad. I'm going to put brand new in quotes there, but we are not calling it the iPad. This is technically the iPad 11th generation, and there's a couple big things that you should take into consideration here. First and foremost is that we now have a new entry-level storage, so we go from 64 to 128 gigs of entry-level storage, and it remains at that $349 price point, which is always great to see. More storage is always a good thing. And now they're putting in a brand new A16 chip versus what it had before, which was going to be the A14 Bionic. So this does make it a little bit faster, but it doesn't actually get Apple Intelligence. Now, it is getting some Apple Intelligence adjacent kind of features that were specific to iPadOS. For example, you still be getting things that came with 18.0, which was something like the calculator application, and math notes, and being able to graph with handwriting and being able to do arithmetic problems, which again, I think is going to be needed for this type of iPad because this is an iPad focused on the education sector for both students and teachers. You also have some smart things that are happening like smart scripts, so if you are handwriting in the Apple Notes application, it'll make your handwriting a little bit more legible while still keeping the same essence of your personal handwriting so it isn't lost in translation. And then you also get voice memos and live transcriptions built into the Notes application, albeit you won't be able to summarize them inside of there because there is no Apple Intelligence, but you can always take it to a third party like a ChatGPT app or a Gemini or whatever the case is if you do need to summarize maybe an hour-long lecture, but at least you know that you're able to transcribe it in real time and transcribe it relatively accurately. Now, like I said, this new iPad is going to be starting at $349, and you can still get that slim folio keyboard case at $249, and it supports the Apple Pencil USB-C, as well as the first generation Apple Pencil, which is still insane that Apple sells those brand new for $100. But if you do get everything that you need, so you get the iPad, the entry-level iPad, that keyboard at $250, and the $100 Apple Pencil Gen 1, that's a $700 package, which is a lot harder to swallow compared to maybe just a $350 package, because again, Apple's creating this price ladder, and even now at this point with these new iPads, it's gotten even more confusing, because now I'm gonna kind of spell it all out here. Ready? So the iPad 10th generation, you can get the slim folio keyboard case, and it works with a USB-C, and the first generation Apple Pencil starts at $349 and go up to 512 gigs of storage. Then you have the new M3 iPad Air, which comes in the 11 and 13 inch sizes, and that one has its own Magic Keyboard, which looks pretty much identical to the Magic Keyboard of the iPad Pro, but it is different and a little bit cheaper, although it's like 99% the same, but it only works with iPad Airs, it doesn't work with iPad Pros, or the iPad 11th generation because of the size, even though the 11-inch form factor and footprint is pretty much the same size as the 11-inch form factor and footprint of the iPad Air. So again, it gets very confusing, and now if somebody is like myself, who's a huge advocate for the iPad and being able to use your iPad as your main computer, and I actually love to recommend the iPad for certain people and certain specifications and certain use cases, for me, myself, this is an extremely confusing lineup. Because like I said, the iPad 11th generation is there, which can do most of iPadOS things, but it doesn't have Apple Intelligence and all the RAM that's needed. Then you have the upper echelon of the iPad Pros, which start at $1,300, and you can easily spec that out to almost $3,000 with storage and RAM and cellular data and the Magic Keyboard and the Apple Pencil Pro. So again, it just becomes very confusing, and definitely subscribe to the channel because I'm going to walk everybody through this with a buyer's guide on which iPad is for you, for which specific use cases, because I do think there is a target customer for each one. But once you start to add in the secondhand market and start to add in those third-party accessories, it gets very confusing and very convoluted to the point where you can walk in wanting just a $300 iPad and walk out spending almost $2,000 because you just walked up that price ladder little by little, because you might have wanted maybe a little extra storage on the iPad 11th gen, but then if you add in a little extra storage, now that price point is getting closer to that M3 iPad Air, so you might as well just get the entry-level iPad Air, but then you gotta soup it up with certain accessories, and then once you start adding the accessories, you might as well just get an iPad Pro, but wait a second, there's the iPad mini over there, and it's more handable and wieldable in one hand. Maybe that's the certain use case that you want out of your iPad. So like I said, it just gets very confusing. So please let me know in the comment down below what you think of A, these new releases, are you gonna be getting them? And if you do get them, where are you coming from? And then B, what you think of the iPad lineup in general and the state of it, because right now, like I keep saying, it's very convoluted, and Apple needs to really kind of figure out exactly who these iPads are for and which iPad deserves each situation, because again, options aren't really a bad thing overall, but these amount of options and the options being so close together makes it confusing for the consumer and for the end buyer. But that'll do it for this video. If you made it to the end, leave a dolphin in the comments down below so I know you made it to the end. And if you want to watch more videos like this one, definitely check out one of these videos below. And until next time, peace everybody. This iPad lineup video is going to be crazy, so definitely get subscribed.